She was a fierce tech CO. He was her sworn enemy. One drunken kiss changed everything. Harper Quinn spent years trying to outsmart Landon West, until a chance encounter led to a secret identity, a twisted engagement, betrayal, and a love neither of them expected. From power plays to painful truths, this is a story of enemies. To lovers with billion-dollar stakes, wild twists, and a golden retriever named Theo who just might steal your heart. Where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. You won't want to miss what happens next. Harper Quinn stormed through the shimmering streets of Manhattan like a thundercloud in heels. The city buzzed with Friday night electricity. Taxi horns blaring, laughter echoing from rooftop bars, and neon lights dancing across glass towers. But none of it touched her. Her jaw was clenched, her perfectly tailored navy blazer flared behind her like a cape, and her phone screen still glowed with the press release that had just shattered her week. Westcorp Global had won. Again. The Brooklyn redevelopment project, her project, was now in the hands of the one man she despised more than anyone in the city, Landon West. The name alone made her grip her phone tighter. He was smug, charming, ruthless. Everything Harper hated. Everything she couldn't afford to lose to. And yet, here she was, tail tucked, licking her wounds in the only way she knew how. By pretending she was fine until she wasn't. She turned the corner and spotted the velvet awning of Eclipse, a bar known for its overpriced martinis and equally expensive clientele. Perfect. She pushed through the glass doors and into a world of soft lighting, pulsing bass, and the kind of atmosphere that whispered, "You don't belong here unless you're a somebody." Well, she was. Harper Quinn, CEO of Quintech. And tonight, she was done playing it cool. She beelined to the bar, ignoring the sideways glances from polished patrons and finance bros with loosened ties. Her heels clicked sharply on the marble as she slid onto a stool and snapped her fingers for the bartender. Vodka martini, dirty, extra olives. The first sip burned, but it grounded her. The second one numbed her rage. By the third, the tightness in her chest started to melt. She leaned her elbows on the counter, staring at her reflection in the mirrored wall. She looked like she always did, put together, sharp, unshakable. But inside, something was cracking. She scrolled through the press release again. Landon's smirking face stared back at her, smug as ever. He probably thought he'd won. Again, like this was a game. Like Harper was just another competitor to crush under his $1,000 shoes. She muttered under her breath, "Gah, I'd love to wipe that smirk off your face." That's when it happened. A man walked past behind her, tall and confident, with dark hair tousled in that annoyingly effortless way. Something about his presence cut through the buzz in her head. He leaned against the opposite end of the bar, backlit by the warm golden light, and laughed at something the bartender said. Harper couldn't hear the words. She didn't care. Her eyes were locked on the curve of his jaw, the way his fingers tapped his glass, the casual power in the way he stood. He wasn't trying too hard. He didn't have to. Maybe it was the martinis. Maybe it was the pent-up frustration of losing to Landon West one more godforsaken time. Maybe she just needed to do something reckless. Something stupid. Something that didn't involve balance sheets and quarterly projections. She slid off her stool, the room tilting ever so slightly, and stalked toward him before she could guess herself. "Hey," she said, breathless. He turned to her, surprised but not alarmed. His eyes were a deep, stormy gray. Kind, but curious. And without thinking, without waiting, Harper grabbed the front of his shirt, pulled him down, and kissed him. Hard, hard. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't sweet. It was messy, impulsive, and full of heat. The kiss was everything she wasn't supposed to do. A spark thrown into gasoline. But to her shock, he kissed her back. One hand went to her waist, steadying her. The other stayed on his glass, like he didn't want to break the moment, but didn't want to make it something it wasn't either. For a second, the bar disappeared. So did the sting of the loss. So did Landon West and his smug, perfect face. When she pulled away, breathless, the man looked at her like she'd just rewritten his night. But before he could speak, Harper muttered something that might have been sorry, or thanks, or don't read into it, and turned on her heel. Back at her seat, her heart pounded louder than the music. What the hell had she just done? She never saw the man smile behind her. Never saw the way his fingers traced his glass. Never noticed that he never gave her his name. Or that the man she'd just kissed, the one who made her forget everything for one fleeting moment, was none other than Landon West himself. Landon West hadn't planned to be at Eclipse that night. In fact, he hated places like it. Too loud, too full of people pretending to matter. But after a week of boardroom battles, media spin, and late-night strategy calls, he'd needed somewhere to breathe. Somewhere no one would expect to find him. And the last thing he expected was her. He'd been nursing a scotch at the far end of the bar, half listening to the bartender rant about city rent when he felt a presence. Sharp, stormy, electric, cut through the noise. Then she was there, grabbing his collar, pulling him down, and crashing her lips against his. Harper Quinn. He recognized her instantly, even before she kissed him, even through the blur of alcohol and mood lighting. He'd seen her 100 times across boardroom tables, on magazine covers, glaring at him across galas and tech summits. But this Harper was different. Unguarded, wild, and fire. Hot from defeat. And he had kissed her back. He should have stopped her, should have told her who he was the second her lips left his. But something held him back. Curiosity, maybe. Or something more dangerous. She hadn't known it was him, hadn't connected the dots, and he'd seen something in her eyes that night that wasn't strategy or competition. It was human, real. And Landon hadn't felt that in longer than he cared to admit. He left the bar before she could return for round 2. She didn't look back. And that should have been the end of it. But the next morning, her kiss still burned on his mouth. And instead of diving into emails or crisis calls from his PER team about the Brooklyn win backlash, he sat on the edge of his bed and thought about Harper, the way she'd kissed him like she was drowning, the way she walked away like she was the one setting the fire. By noon, he had a plan. A stupid one. A risky, reckless, ridiculous one. He'd meet her again, but not as Landon West, CEO, empire, builder, the man she loved to hate. No, he'd become someone else. Just a guy. A stranger with no agenda. A clean slate. He'd get to know the Harper behind the blazer and the power heels. The one who kissed a stranger in a bar because her whole world had gone sideways. He dug through his phone and found an old contact card he hadn't used in years. Landon Ray. Generic. Unassuming. Forgettable. Perfect. The next few days, he scoped out her patterns. It wasn't stalking, he told himself. Just strategic placement. She liked to jog in Central Park early, before the chaos of Midtown swallowed the day. She always ran the loop by the Bethesda fountain, earbuds in, her hair in a tight ponytail, no entourage, just her and the city. So Landon got himself a dog. Well, sort of. Theo was his, technically. A golden retriever, his assistant had been watching during his overseas trips. Friendly, drooly, and just chaotic enough to be charming. Perfect bait. On a crisp Tuesday morning, he timed his run to intersect with hers. Dressed in a Columbia hoodie, old running shoes, and a ball cap pulled low, he looked like any other New Yorker with a hyper dog and a caffeine dependency. When he saw her in the distance, pounding the path with that same fire he remembered from the bar. His heart sped up, just a little. Theo did the rest. The dog bounded ahead, tail wagging like mad, and practically launched himself at Harper's knees. "Whoa!" she yelped, stumbling to a stop. "Sorry," Landon called, breathless and grinning. "He thinks everyone in leggings is his best friend." Harper laughed, and knelt to scratch Theo's ears. "He's adorable." "What's his name?" "Theo. And I'm Ryan. Ryan Ray." He lied smoothly, sticking to the alias his old fake ID had once used. "Nice day for a run?" She nodded, brushing her hair from her face. "I know," he almost said, but bit his tongue. She didn't recognize him. Not without the expensive suits or the press glare or the corporate armor. They talked for a few minutes, about the park, Theo's antics, running routes. Her smile wasn't the one he'd seen on stage or in shareholder meetings. It was softer, real. And when they parted ways, Harper glanced over her shoulder and waved. Landon stood there long after she was gone, Theo tugging on the leash. This was dangerous, insane even. But that kiss hadn't been a fluke. It had been a spark. And now that he'd seen what was under Harper's armor, he wanted more. Much more. The next time Harper saw him, it was barely past 7 a.m., the city still rubbing sleep from its eyes. She'd just finished her second lap around Central Park, heart pounding, ponytail damp with sweat, when a familiar blur of golden fur came barreling toward her from the opposite path. She barely had time to brace herself before Theo launched into her legs again, tail wagging furiously, tongue hanging out like he owned the place. "You again?" She laughed, crouching down as Theo licked her cheek with wild abandon. "This dog has no sense of personal space. He has very selective boundaries," came the easy, warm voice from behind her. She looked up and saw him, Ryan Ray. Same tousled hair, same cocky half grin, only this time in a gray tee and navy joggers, earbuds dangling around his neck like he'd just been pretending to run. "Hey," he said, catching his breath as he reined in Theo's leash. "Sorry about him. He's got an embarrassing crush." Harper chuckled, standing and brushing grass from her leggings. "Honestly, I've had worse greetings from humans." They fell into step beside each other on the path, Harper slowing her pace as Ryan matched it easily. It felt natural. Not forced, not performative. Just like conversation between two strangers who didn't feel like strangers. "So Harper," he said after a beat, "what's your deal? You always this chipper before sunrise?" She smirked. "I'm not chipper. I'm caffeinated and slightly angry all the time. It's part of my charm." Ryan laughed, and Harper found herself smiling more than she meant to. They talked about running, bad coffee, the worst bagel spots in Manhattan, and how Theo once tried to eat a USB cable. It wasn't deep. It wasn't probing, but it felt easy in a way she wasn't used to. Especially not with men. Most guys, once they found out who she was, Harper Quinn, CEO, tech royalty, untouchable ice queen, either tried too hard to impress her or immediately felt threatened. But Ryan didn't ask where she worked, didn't comment on her last Forbes profile or pretend to know everything about startups. He just listened. Asked her what podcasts she liked. Laughed when she admitted she fell asleep to true crime stories. By the time they reached the coffee cart near the 79th Street entrance, Harper had forgotten about the stack of reports waiting on her desk or the passive-aggressive email from her mother that morning. For once, she wasn't Harper, the strategist. She was just Harper. Tired, slightly sweaty, and surprisingly at ease. You take cream, he asked, nodding toward the vendor as he ordered 2 cups. Black, she said, watching as Theo tried to charm a croissant from a tourist. He handed her the cup, and their fingers brushed for a split second. Just enough to jolt her a little more awake than caffeine ever could. I owe you one, she said, sipping the too-hot brew. For what? For reminding me mornings don't have to suck. He grinned, and something about the way he looked at her, open, curious, completely lacking that usual sharp glint she'd come to associate with powerful men, made her chest tighten in the strangest way. They went their separate ways with no promises, no exchange numbers, just a casual, see you around. And maybe she should have left it at that, but the next day, there he was again. Same path, same time, Theo already bounding ahead like he knew exactly where to find her. It became a rhythm, quiet and grounding. Some mornings they ran. Other times they just strolled with coffee and traded ridiculous stories about childhood mishaps and New York oddities. Ryan never pried, never asked why she sometimes showed up looking like she hadn't slept or why her shoulders always tensed when her phone buzzed. He was just there. And Harper found herself craving that, his calm energy, Theo's sloppy greetings, the weird feeling that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't as fleeting as it should been. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly guess, was that Ryan Ray wasn't a dog, loving freelance tech guy from Queens. He was Landon West, the man she'd spent the last 5 years trying to beat. The man who'd kissed her back in a bar without revealing his name. And the man who, despite everything, was starting to fall for her far more quickly than he ever intended to. It started with a text. No name, no number, just, still thinking about us. Can we talk? Harper stared at it, her stomach flipping, thumb hovering over the screen like it might bite her. The only person reckless enough to send that message was Chase Donovan. Her ex, her very public, very deceitful, very unapologetic ex. She didn't reply. But he didn't need her to. The next afternoon, he was waiting outside Quintet's glass doors, leaning against her town car like he had every right to be there. Same easy grin. Same pressed shirt. Same soulless eyes. She stopped just short of him, arms crossed, voice cold. You're trespassing. Nice to see you too, Chase said, unfazed. You look great, Harp. Don't call me that. The nickname, once intimate, now felt like poison. I made a mistake, he said, stepping forward. She stepped back. You cheated. That's not a mistake. That's a decision. Chase ran a hand through his hair, his charm cracking slightly. It meant nothing. Rachel. She was a phase. You and I had something real. You can't tell me you don't feel that. I felt humiliated, she snapped. I walked into my own apartment and found you in bed with my best friend. You don't come back from that. He hesitated, lips parted like he wanted to argue. Then he nodded once, eyes tightening. Fine. Just think about it. I won't, Harper said, brushing past him and into the car. But the damage was done. Just the sight of him reopened everything. The betrayal, the sleepless nights, the headlines that followed, casting her as the Ice Queen CO too focused on power to keep a man. The same headlines Rachel had conveniently helped circulate with just enough venom laced in faux concern. As if on cue, her phone buzzed again. This time, a name popped up. Rachel Lynn. Harper's blood went cold. She hadn't seen Rachel since the fallout. Had deleted her from everything, scrubbed her from memory like a bad spreadsheet error. But there it was. A message. We should catch up. I miss us. Us. as if us hadn't ended with betrayal and heartbreak. Harper slammed her phone face down on the passenger seat and closed her eyes, trying to breathe through the rage. That night, she found herself back in Central Park, walking with Ryan and Theo under the amber glow of street lamps. The conversation was lighter than usual, her laughter a little more forced, her silences longer. Ryan noticed, but didn't press. Until she finally muttered, "My ex showed up today." Ryan didn't respond right away. He kept tossing Theo's tennis ball and letting the dog bound after it. "Charming guy?" he asked. "Used to be," she said quietly, "until he decided sleeping with my best friend was a fun hobby." Ryan winced.
"Ooh. Oh. Oh."
"Yeah," she said. "They both tried to reach out today. Like, like I owe them closure or something." He glanced at her, expression unreadable. "You don't owe anyone who burned you an explanation. You owe yourself peace." Harper looked at him for a long time. "You ever been betrayed?" He hesitated. "Yeah, more than once. People closest to, exactly how to cut the deepest." They kept walking in silence for a while, the only sounds Theo's panting and distant sirens echoing through the city. Harper found herself inching closer to Ryan without realizing it, drawn in by his calm. When they stopped at her corner, she turned to him. "Thanks for not asking for the messy details." He shrugged. "Details don't change the damage. I'm just glad you're standing." She smiled, soft and surprised. "You always say the right thing." Ryan tried to smile back, but inside, the guilt twisted deeper. Because he wasn't saying everything. Because while Harper was dodging ghosts from her past, his own secrets were circling faster. And the biggest one of all was that he wasn't Ryan Ray. He was Landon West. And Max, his reckless half-brother, had just sent him a warning text of his own. Rachel Lynn just reached out.
"Says she has dirt on someone named Harper Quinn. Want me to bite?"
Landon didn't reply. But the storm was coming. And he wasn't sure how long he could keep Harper from getting caught in the crossfire. The war for Brooklyn had never been just about real estate. Not really. For Harper, it was personal. About legacy, about proving she could build something greater than her father ever did. For Landon, it was a test of loyalty, strategy, and now, something more dangerous. Emotion. The project itself was a crown jewel. 5 city blocks of untapped potential, ready to become the next tech corridor. Quintex had spent months crafting a sustainable, community-based proposal. But Westcorp, with its sleek numbers and political leverage, had muscled into the bid late, backed by the usual swarm of lobbyists and old money. Harper had thrown herself into the fight like it was her last. Late nights, no sleep, snapping at interns and rewriting pitch decks at 2 a.m. She'd even turned off her morning runs with Ryan, claiming deadlines. What she didn't tell him was that it hurt more than it should. Missing him, missing Theo, missing the calm. Ryan, Landon, was feeling it too. Every time he saw her face on the news or heard her name in boardroom whispers, his heart twisted. His team was thrilled, of course. Westcorp had the numbers, the city's leanings, the flashy partnerships. But Landon saw something else. He saw Harper's grit in every detail of her proposal. He saw her values in the solar blueprints, the affordable housing units, the notes about green space and youth tech labs. He saw her, and he was falling harder than he meant to. It wasn't supposed to get this far. The night before the bid decision, Landon sat alone in his corner office, the city stretching out in glittering lines beyond the windows. Theo snored gently at his feet. His team had left hours ago, confident the vote was in the bag. But he couldn't shake the image of Harper, bent over blueprints, glasses low on her nose, fighting with everything she had to make something better. He picked up his phone, stared at it, then set it down again. If he told her now, if he came clean, it would blow everything up. And yet, keeping the lie felt heavier by the hour. The decision came the next morning. Harper was in her office when the news broke. Westcorp had secured the lion's share of the Brooklyn project. Her hands clenched around the edge of her desk. Her team buzzed around her, offering damage control plans and optimistic spins, but it all blurred. She nodded, smiled like a CEO should, and excused herself. Meanwhile, Westcorp's offices erupted in celebration. Landon stood apart from the noise, silent as champagne corks popped. His assistant handed him the final breakdown. 80 Westcorp, 20 Quintex, an unexpected concession he'd forced through the night before. "Are you sure about this?" his coup had asked at the time. "This kind of charity could cost us long-term control." "It's not charity," Landon had said. "It's leverage. Trust me." But it wasn't leverage. It was a gift. A reckless, vulnerable, utterly irrational gift to the one woman who didn't need his pity, but deserved a win. That evening, Harper walked the edge of the Hudson, trying to ignore the gnawing frustration clawing at her chest. Her phone buzzed. An alert, a revised project memo. She scanned it quickly and stopped cold. Quintex had been granted control of the community tech center build-out and naming rights. It wasn't the whole project, but it was something, more than something. It was the heart of her proposal. Confused, she reread it twice, and then, slowly, a thought surfaced. Ryan. No, he couldn't have. Could he? Back at Westcorp, Landon was alone again, staring out at the skyline, replaying the look in her eyes from their last coffee. How she lit up when talking about giving kids a future in tech. How her voice softened when she talked about her late father's dream for Brooklyn. He should have told her, should have walked away. But he didn't. Harper hadn't reached out all day. No thank you, no accusations. Just silence. And maybe that was worse than her yelling. Maybe it meant she knew something, or suspected. Maybe it meant she didn't trust herself to talk to him at all. He scratched behind Theo's ears and whispered, "She's not going to forgive me, is she?" Theo wagged his tail once, oblivious. Landon leaned back in his chair, the city humming around him, and wondered how long he could keep hiding the truth before it burned everything down, including the only thing he actually wanted to protect. The scream caught Harper off guard, sharp, sudden. Too close. She barely had time to turn before hands grabbed her from behind, rough and fast. A van screeched beside the curb, its side door yanked open. Her bag hit the pavement as someone shoved her forward. She kicked, hard, connecting with someone's shin, but it didn't slow them down. They were too fast, too focused. "Let go," she screamed, twisting violently. The street was dark, mostly empty. Midtown had quieted after hours. And Harper, who'd stayed late at the office for a final review of the Brooklyn Community Center blueprints, had left through the back exit like she always did, alone, unseen. Except someone had been watching. They threw her into the van, and the door slammed shut before her scream could finish. She clawed at the windowless walls, the floor lurching beneath her as the vehicle accelerated. "Let me go. What do you want?" A voice from the front, smug and cold. "Relax, Harper. This isn't a ransom." It was a woman. Familiar. Sharp with venom. "Rachel." Harper froze. "You're insane." "No," Rachel replied. "Just done being the villain in your perfect little life." Another voice. Male this time. Snorted. "You should have picked me, Harp. We could have ruled this town." Chase. Chase. It hit her like a second punch to the ribs. The betrayal, layered and absurd. They were working together. Her ex-best friend and the ex who'd betrayed her. She tried to steady her breathing, to think. They didn't want money. They wanted humiliation, control, payback. She scanned the interior of the van. No ropes, no weapons. Just two masked figures in the front and the echo of her own heart pounding like war drums. What they didn't know was that someone else had been watching too. Landon had been across the street, parked in the shadows, fighting with himself about whether to tell her the truth, whether to rip off the mask and finally confess who he was. But then he'd seen the van. He saw Harper, saw the way they grabbed her, and instinct overrode everything else. He floored it. The van took a hard right toward the bridge, tires squealing. Landon's car shot forward, weaving through traffic with surgical focus. His heart slammed against his ribs, fury boiling over his skin. He couldn't lose her, not like this. Up ahead, the van slowed, about to turn onto an industrial road flanked by old warehouses. Landon didn't wait. He cut across the median and rammed the car into the van's back corner. Metal screamed. Tires skidded. The van veered off course, crashing against a dumpster. The doors flung open as Rachel and Chase scrambled out, masks askew, panic flooding their eyes. Landon didn't hesitate. He jumped from his car and wrenched open the side door. Harper was on the floor, bruised, shaken, but alive. She blinked up at him, stunned. "Ryan?" she breathed, voice hoarse. He reached down, pulled her into his arms. "I've got you. You're safe." Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have called. Rachel and Chase vanished into the shadows. But Landon didn't give chase. He only had eyes for her. Harper clung to him, trembling.
How? How did you find me?
He brushed her hair back, jaw clenched. "I was nearby. Call it a hunch." He didn't tell her he'd been following her. Didn't tell her he'd heard Chase at a bar 2 nights ago, muttering about teaching that ice queen a lesson. He hadn't known exactly what they'd planned. Hadn't known exactly what they'd planned. And now, he was right. They sat on the curb together, her in his arms, city lights flickering off the windows above. "I didn't think anyone would come," she whispered. "I always will," he said, softer than she'd ever heard him speak. She looked at him like she was seeing him for the first time. The steady hands, the fierce gaze, the warmth he radiated without even trying. This man, this version of Ryan, wasn't just charming or casual. He was her anchor in chaos. But even in that moment of fragile peace, something tugged at her gut, a question, a doubt. "Who are you really?" she asked. Landon's breath caught, but he didn't answer. Not yet. Instead, he held her tighter as the sirens got louder, knowing that saving her had only bought him time, and that the truth was racing toward them just as fast. The elevator doors slid shut behind them, sealing them into silence. Harper leaned against the mirrored wall of her loft's foyer, her wrists still sore, her mind still spinning. She'd barely said a word since the police had taken her statement in Ryan. No, Landon, though she still didn't know that, had driven her home. Her body moved on instinct. Unlock the door, flick on the lights, grab the first aid kit from under the sink. Now, he sat on her plush, gray couch. Theo at his feet, letting her dab antiseptic across the cut on his cheek. She worked in focused silence, her touch gentle but trembling. "Who were those people?" he finally asked, his voice low, rough from adrenaline and street dust. "Ex-friends," Harper replied flatly. "Or ex-everythings. Chase and Rachel. Thought they'd scare me into what? Regret, I don't know. They're idiots. She tossed the used gauze into the trash with a little too much force. Landon studied her. Even shaken, she was composed. Chin high, voice clipped. But her eyes betrayed the storm she was holding back. There was a crack in her armor, just wide enough to see her heart pulsing underneath. He wanted to hold her, to reassure her, to tell her she was safe now. But he also knew the truth he'd been hiding is about to explode. Charlie, he started, then caught himself. No, Harper. Her real name. Not the name he'd used in his head when they first met under false pretenses. There's something I need to tell you. Her hands froze mid-motion. You're not married, are you? He almost smiled. No. Secret kid? Definitely not. She raised an eyebrow, trying to disarm her own dread with sarcasm. Please don't say you're actually a tech influencer. He laughed, just once, then sobered. Worse. She met his eyes then, and something in the way he looked at her made her stomach tighten. I'm not Ryan Ray, he said. My name is Landon West. It didn't land all at once. For a second, she stared at him like he was speaking another language. Then it clicked. She pulled back, her breath hitching. No, you're not, she said, voice suddenly hollow. I am. She shook her head like she could undo the words if she moved fast enough. That's not possible. He didn't move. I should have told you. That night at the bar, you kissed me. You didn't know who I was. I didn't expect it. And I didn't mean to lie, not at first. But then, you were just you, not the CO, not the CO. Not the rival, just Harper, and I didn't want to lose that. Her hands clenched into fists. So you lied. I didn't plan it like some long con, he said, standing slowly. But I should have told you. I should have trusted you. You let me fall for you, she said, her voice breaking in a way she hated. And you were the one person I swore I'd never. God, you're him. You're the man I've been trying to outplay for years. The man who took Brooklyn. I gave you part of it, he said quietly. She stared at him like she didn't even know who he was anymore. And I'm supposed to say thank you for the scraps? He stepped forward. It wasn't about power. It was about you. Harper, I'm falling for you. I already have. And I know I screwed this up. But everything I said, everything I felt. Real, she echoed, backing away. You were two people, and I trusted one of them. Landon's heart sank. I never stopped being that guy. Yes, you did, she snapped, voice sharp. The moment you chose to let me believe a lie. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. She stood in the center of her loft, arms crossed tightly, fighting back everything that wanted to crack through. Get out, she said finally. He didn't move. Get out, Landon, now. He turned, walking to the door without another word. Theo hesitated for a second, looking between them, before trailing after him. As the door closed behind him, Harper sank into the couch, her body folding like paper. She stared at the glass of water on the coffee table, untouched, then at the spot where he'd been sitting minutes before. The man she thought she knew. The man who had held her through panic made her laugh, made her feel safe. The man who had lied about everything. And yet, somehow, the only thing she wanted more than to forget him was to make him earn her trust back. But not tonight. Tonight, She would sit in the wreckage and remember what it felt like to believe in someone, right before the truth shattered everything. The silence in Harper's loft lingered long after Landon left, thick and suffocating. She sat curled on the edge of the couch, her phone dark on the coffee table, her thoughts loud enough to drown out the city noise outside. The walls felt closer somehow, the air heavier. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. The man she'd opened up to, trusted with pieces of herself she rarely shared, hadn't just lied. He was the lie. She replayed every moment, every run in the park, every smile over coffee, every stupid inside joke about Theo's obsession with squirrels. And now, every word felt tainted. He hadn't just watched her fall. He'd caught her under false pretenses. Her gut twisted with the ache of it. And still, she hated that she missed him. The next morning brought no relief. Her mother called at 7:04 a.m., sharp, her voice chipper in that specific, pointed way Harper had come to dread. "Darling, we missed you at dinner last week. You know your father's been waiting to introduce you to your fiancé." Harper let out a hollow laugh, brushing tangled hair from her face. "You still on about that?" Avery Quinn teased on the other end. "This is important. His family is respected. Powerful. The match makes sense, Harper. You've dodged this long enough. Tonight. No excuses." Harper almost declined. Almost. But something in her mother's tone, cloying and smug, rubbed her the wrong way. Maybe she was spoiling for a fight. Maybe she just needed a distraction from the chaos still buzzing in her chest. "Fine," she said. "One drink, then I'm out." That evening, she stepped into her parents' brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, dressed in tailored black hair pulled back into her no-nonsense bun. Her father, Tom Quinn, met her at the door with a scotch and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Glad you could make it, sweetheart. He's already here." She barely had time to process that before the living room doors opened and he stepped through. "Landon. Landon." Her heart stopped. Literally skipped a beat. He looked different. Clean, shaven, in a navy suit. No trace of the laid-back dog walker she'd come to know. He looked like the man she had spent years battling in boardrooms. Confident, polished, untouchable. She stared at him, her throat tightening. "You've got to be kidding me." Landon froze, color draining slightly from his face, though he recovered quickly. "Harper, you're the fiancé?" she asked, incredulous. Avery, oblivious to the crackling tension, clapped her hands. "Isn't it wonderful? A true merging of dynasties?" "I'm leaving," Harper said, already stepping back toward the door. "No, wait," Landon said, moving after her. "I didn't know. I swear. I didn't realize you were her until we were already—" "Oh, what?" she snapped, turning. "Until you were already too deep into playing pretend. Or until I kissed you in a bar and didn't recognize the man I've been going to war with for half a decade." Her parents stood frozen, blinking, finally registering the explosive undertone. Landon's voice dropped, low and urgent. "I didn't plan this, but I meant everything. Every walk. Every stupid text. I wasn't lying about that." "You were lying about everything," Harper shot back. "Every name. Every word. You watched me fall for someone who didn't exist." He looked like he wanted to argue, like he wanted to fall to his knees and beg her to see the truth. But the words didn't come fast enough. She shook her head, lips trembling, and walked out without another word. Later that night, she sat curled up on her balcony with a glass of wine, staring out over the lights of Brooklyn. The world felt like it had tilted on its axis. Her heart still hadn't decided what to do. Rage burned hot in her chest, but under it was confusion, pain, and something worse, longing. Her phone lit up again, a voicemail from her mother. "You didn't stay long enough to hear his full name, Harper. It's Landon West. Yes, that West. And he's already agreed to the engagement contract. You two are bound, whether you like it or not." Harper didn't move. The glass slipped from her hand, shattering beside her chair. The world was officially upside down. She had fallen for her rival. And somehow, against every warning, her heart hadn't stopped hoping he'd find a way to fix what he'd broken. The walls of Westcorp felt colder than usual. Landon sat at the head of the executive conference table, the early morning light casting sharp lines across the floor to ceiling windows behind him. Around the room, the board of directors shifted uncomfortably in their seats, tension humming just beneath the polished surface. Vanessa West, his stepmother, sat with her arms folded, wearing a tight, smug smile that hadn't cracked in days. "Let's not waste time," she said smoothly. "There's concern over your recent decisions, Landon. Namely, your choice to concede a major portion of the Brooklyn project to Quintech. The board feels it was unstrategic." Landon leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "It was a long-term play. It secured the community's trust and kept the press off our backs. I stand by it." Vanessa's smile sharpened. "A long-term play that conveniently benefited a woman you're personally entangled with. A woman your own company has been in direct competition with for years. We're not talking about ethics. We're talking about ethics. We're talking about conflict of interest." Murmurs swept through the room. Landon didn't flinch. He'd been expecting this. The moment he gave Harper that slice of the project, Vanessa had smelled blood. She was circling now, trying to paint him as compromised, sentimental. Weak. Weak. "Are you questioning my leadership?" he said coolly. "Or just looking for an excuse to take it from me?" Her gaze didn't waver. The board deserves a CEO who puts the company first. Not one chasing romantic delusions with our fiercest competitor. Landon stood slowly, the air in the room shifting. "Let's talk about priorities then," he said. "Because while you were busy plotting boardroom coups, I've been cleaning up your mess." He slid a folder across the table. Vanessa's eyes narrowed as she opened it. Inside were documents. Detailed records, security camera stills, bank transfers, all pointing to her involvement in hiring the thugs who had gone after him. Outside, Harper's office. And worse, ties to Rachel and Chase's off-the-books payment. "You sent people after me," Landon said, his voice now steel. "You endangered my life. And Harper's. And don't bother denying it. The evidence is bulletproof." Vanessa's face paled for the first time. The board erupted in whispers. Landon nodded toward his legal counsel, who stepped forward. "Effective immediately, Vanessa West is suspended pending investigation. The shareholders will be notified, and I've already called for a vote to remove her permanently." "Ryan," she started, slipping on his name out of habit. But he cut her off. "I'm done with your games," he said flatly. "You tried to take everything from me, but you forgot one thing." He looked around the room. "I built this company. I know every floor, every number, every person who walks through these doors. And I'm not going anywhere." When he finally sat, the board members were silent. Then, one by one, they nodded. Some with quiet approval, some with relief. Vanessa rose without another word and stormed out, her heels echoing against the marble, like a retreating army. But Landon didn't feel victorious. Not really. Because as he stared down at the polished table, all he could think about was Harper. He hadn't heard from her since that night. Not a text. Not even a rejection. Just a silence, so complete it pressed against his chest like a weight. She had every reason to hate him, and still, some stubborn part of him hoped that when the dust settled, she'd see past the lies, see the man he'd tried to be, even if he failed. That night, he found himself standing outside East's Ninth, a bar Harper used to frequent with friends. He didn't mean to be there. It was muscle memory, or fate, or something worse. And then she walked in. Hair curled around her shoulders, black leather jacket zipped high, and fire in her step. She didn't see him at first. Just went straight to the bar, ordered something dark and dangerous, and downed it in 2 gulps. Her friends flanked her, but she didn't smile. She didn't joke. She just stared into her glass like it held all the answers. Landon approached slowly, cautiously. Harper. Harper. She turned, blinking slowly. Her eyes were glossy, not from tears, but maybe from vodka and exhaustion. Her gaze sharpened when she saw him. "You've got nerve showing up here," she said, voice slurred but steady. "I had to," he said. "I just needed to know if you're okay." She stepped forward, poking a finger into his chest. "You're a liar. A manipulative, charming, infuriating liar." He nodded. "I know." "I should hate you," she said, her voice softer now. "I want to hate you. But you don't." She didn't answer. And that silence, hopeful, wounded, messy, was louder than any words he could have said. He took her hand. She didn't pull away. And for a moment, just one, there was still a chance. Morning came too soon. The sunlight creeping through Harper's loft windows felt harsh, too bright, like it was exposing something she wasn't ready to face. Her head pounded, her limbs heavy beneath the tangle of sheets and twisted emotions. She turned over, and there he was. Landon. Still asleep, chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm, one hand resting just inches from hers. For a moment, she just watched him, the faint stubble along his jaw, the crease between his brows. He looked peaceful in a way she hadn't seen before. She sat up slowly, clutching the edge of the bed like it might anchor her to something real. Flashes of the night before swirled in her memory. Vodka, her ranting at him in the bar, jabbing him in the bar, jabbing him in the chest and calling him a liar. And then, somehow, between anger and exhaustion, they'd ended up here. In this quiet, messy, dangerous space between heartbreak and something else she didn't dare name. Landon stirred beside her, blinking into the light. When his eyes met hers, they were soft, guardless. "Hey," he said, voice rough from sleep. Harper didn't answer right away. She just stared at him, her heart thudding unevenly in her chest. "Why can't I hate you?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Landon pushed himself up on one elbow. "Because deep down, you know I'm not the villain you want me to be." She gave a soft, bitter laugh. "You lied to me." "I did," he admitted. "And if I could take it back, I would. But everything after that, every minute I spent with you." Her eyes met his, searching, still unsure. She wanted to pull away, build walls, say something sharp that would give her the upper hand. But she was tired. Tired of fighting, tired of fighting, tired of pretending she hadn't felt something real, too. They stayed like that for a while. Silent, breathing in sync, the air between them, fragile and full of everything unsaid. Eventually, Harper slipped out of bed and wrapped herself in a robe, padding to the kitchen to pour coffee. She handed Landon a mug without a word, and he took it like it was a peace offering. Neither of them said, "What now?" but the question hovered in the room, heavy and inevitable. Later that day, Harper returned to Quintet and buried herself in work. She shut the door to her office, canceled meetings, and went through contracts with mechanical precision. The Brooklyn project was moving forward. The community center's design had been finalized, and everything she'd fought for was falling into place. and yet, it all felt hollow. She missed Theo's muddy paw prints on her shoes, missed Ryan, or rather, the version of Landon she let herself trust. The lines were blurred now. The lie had burned through the fantasy, but something underneath it had survived. Across the city, Landon sat in his office at Westcor, the skyline stretching endlessly behind him. He stared at the engagement contract on his desk, the one Avery Quinn had pushed Harper toward, the one he'd signed in a desperate bid to be closer to her. Now it felt absurd. Because what he wanted wasn't some corporate arrangement. He wanted Harper. All of her. The sharp edges and soft spaces alike. He picked up his phone, thumb hovering over her name. Then he set it down again. This had to be on her terms now. That evening, Harper's mother called again, urging her to attend a business gala hosted by the city. One both Quintex and Westcor were expected to attend. It'll be good for optics, Avery insisted. A show of unity, progress. Harper almost said no, almost. But something in her told her this wasn't just another event. It would be the stage where something shifted. Again. She stood by her closet, staring at rows of carefully curated outfits, and picked the one dress she'd only worn once. A deep crimson wrap that made her feel like fire. As she zipped it up, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. Not the broken girl from the bar. Not the betrayed CO. But someone in between. Someone still figuring it out. She was walking into a room that held everything she'd lost, and maybe everything she still had a chance to reclaim. And Landon, he'd be waiting. The grand ballroom at the Harrington Hotel glowed with golden light, chandeliers glittering above polished marble floors, and the buzz of New York's elite filled every corner. CEOs, investors, and journalists moved through the space in curated chaos, dressed in sleek black suits and shimmering gowns. It was the kind of night meant for spectacle, and Landon West had planned every inch of it. He stood near the entrance in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, no tie, the top button of his crisp white shirt undone, relaxed but intentional. His eyes scanned the crowd, every instinct sharp, every nerve on fire. He hadn't slept in 2 days, not since the night in Harper's loft, not since the moment she asked why she couldn't hate him. The question had haunted him. And now, tonight, he was going to answer it. Harper arrived late, fashionably so. She walked through the doors with the kind of poise that demanded attention and silence. Her crimson dress hugged her curves and moved like silk poured over fire. A hush rippled through the crowd. Landon saw her before she saw him, and for a moment, he couldn't move. She looked like a storm wrapped in elegance. She spotted him across the ballroom. Their eyes locked. He started toward her but was cut off by the evening's host, a local developer who insisted on ushering both her and Landon toward the stage. "Let's get a picture of our favorite rivals, turned collaborators," he said with a laugh, shoving microphones in their faces. Landon didn't flinch. He stepped up beside Harper, close but not touching. The host grinned. "Tonight, we welcome 2 of the city's brightest stars, Harper Quinn of Quintech and Landon West of Westcor. Tell us, what's the best thing about the other's company?" Harper held the mic first. Her voice was calm, polished. "Westcorp has grit. They fight hard, even when they shouldn't." Laughter rippled through the crowd, but Harper's gaze didn't leave Landon's face. His turn. Landon took the mic, his voice quiet but deliberate. "Quintech has heart. They fight for people, not just profit. And Harper Quinn. She's brilliant, fierce. She never quits, even when she's exhausted. She's the kind of person who makes you want to be better." The room quieted. The host blinked, unsure of how to follow that. Landon turned to Harper, and suddenly the noise didn't matter. "I've been an idiot," he said, loud enough for the room to hear. "I kept who I was from you because I was afraid of losing you before I even had you. But I'm done hiding." He reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small black box. Gasps fluttered across the ballroom like wind through leaves. Harper froze. "I love you, Harper Quinn," he said, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, simple and breathtaking. "And I want to spend my life with you, building something real, something lasting. Marry me." For a moment, everything held still. No sound, no movement. Just Harper staring at the man she had once sworn to destroy, down on one knee, holding out everything he had left to give. She stepped forward, heart hammering against her ribs. "You're still a jerk," she whispered, voice trembling. Landon smiled. "Yeah, I know." Her lips curved into something that almost felt like laughter, and then like something softer, warmer. "Yes," she said, "I will." The room erupted in cheers, applause thundering as Landon slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss. It wasn't careful or curated. It was raw and real, the kind of kiss that closed one chapter and began another. Offstage, Tom and Avery Quinn exchanged stunned glances. Tom lifted his champagne glass with a grunt. "Well, he's got guts." Avery blinked, still processing, while across the room, Landon's grandfather Henry chuckled under his breath. "Told you the ring would work." As the music returned and guests flooded the dance floor, Landon pulled Harper aside for just a moment of quiet. "One more thing," he murmured, slipping a manila folder into her hand. She opened it, her jaw dropped. It was a transfer agreement. $10 billion in Westcorp stock labeled Doughy for Quintech. "You're insane," she said, half laughing, half stunned. "Only for you," he said, grinning. She shook her head and kissed him again, the city's lights flickering outside like 1,000 blessings. And just like that, the rivals had rewritten their story. The news broke the next morning. Every headline in the business section read like a love story rewritten in bold font. Quintech and Westcorp announce historic merger. And beneath it, a photograph of Harper and Landon, holding hands as they left the gala, still glowing from the night before. The internet, predictably, lost its mind. Some called it a power move. Others called it reckless. But for the two people at the heart of it, it was neither. It was inevitable. Behind closed doors, the paperwork came together fast. The two companies would remain autonomous in name, but partner on all major projects moving forward, starting with Brooklyn. Harper would lead the innovation and community development sectors, while Landon handled finance and infrastructure. Side by side. No longer rivals, but partners. The shift in energy was immediate. Where tension had once ruled, collaboration bloomed. Ard, Harper. The wedding wasn't lavish. Not like everyone expected. In fact, it was held in Central Park, beneath the canopy of trees just off the loop where they used to run together. Where Ryan Ray and Harper Quinn first learned how to laugh without their titles. The guest list was small. Close friends, a few colleagues, and both families, seated opposite each other with more curiosity than animosity. Harper wore a simple ivory dress with a low back and soft sleeves that caught the breeze like wings. Her hair was pinned in loose waves, one strand brushing her cheek as she smiled. Landon waited at the altar, Theo sitting loyally at his side with a silk pillow tied to his collar, carrying the rings like a proud page boy. When she walked down the aisle, Harper didn't feel nervous. She felt grounded, like every broken piece of her story had led here, not to perfection, but to something real, something earned. Landon's eyes never left her. You still have time to run, she teased under her breath when they met. I'm where I'm supposed to be, he whispered back. The ceremony was short, sweet, and surprisingly emotional. When the officiant asked if Landon took Harper as his wife, he didn't hesitate. With every part of me, he said, voice catching slightly. Harper blinked back tears. Even on the days I out-negotiate you? Especially then. When they kissed, the crowd erupted in applause. Theo barked once, tail wagging like mad. That night, at a quiet, candlelit dinner shared between both families, Harper's father stood to raise a toast. He looked at his daughter, his once headstrong, guarded girl, and then at Landon. To the two of you, Tom said, voice gruff but honest. Didn't see it coming. Didn't always want to see it coming. But I'm damn glad it did. Glasses clinked. Laughter circled the room. Henry, Landon's grandfather, leaned over to whisper, "Told you the ring would work out." Months later, the Brooklyn Community Tech Center opened to the public. The media called it a triumph, but Harper and Landon called it something else. A promise kept. On the first day, they stood together in front of the building, watching as kids poured in to see the new labs, the classrooms, the startup incubators. Harper caught Landon's hand and squeezed it. This is what I wanted," she said softly. Landon nodded. "And you got it. You always do." They kissed, cameras flashing in the distance. But they weren't thinking about headlines anymore. They were thinking about home, about shared mornings and messy coffee and Theo curled at the foot of the bed, about what it meant to truly belong to someone, not as a possession or a deal, but as a choice. As the sun set over the city, Harper leaned into Landon's side and whispered, "You're still on probation, West." He laughed and pulled her closer. Wouldn't have it any other way. Their story had started with rivalry, chaos, and one reckless kiss. But somewhere between the lies and the truth, the fights and the forgiveness, they had built something else, something stronger, something lasting. From enemies to soulmates, Harper and Landon had rewritten the rules. And in doing so, found the kind of love that doesn't play by them. Life lesson from the story. At its core, Harper and Landon's journey reminds us that love, real, enduring love, isn't about perfection. It's about honesty, growth, and the courage to let someone in, even when it feels risky. They were rivals, built walls out of fear and pride, and made mistakes that hurt. But through all of it, they chose vulnerability over ego. They learned that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt. Not by grand gestures alone, but by showing up consistently, by fighting with each other instead of against. The story also teaches us that identity doesn't define worth. Harper saw beyond Landon's last name, and he fell in love with the woman beneath the title. They discovered that healing can happen when you confront your past and forgive, not just others, but yourself. In a world that thrives on competition and image, their love blossomed in the quiet moments. Morning runs, shared coffee, a dog named Theo. Sometimes the people we least expect become the ones we need the most. So wherever you are in your journey, whether you're chasing dreams, guarding your heart, or standing in the middle of a mess, remember, it's okay to start over. It's okay to start over. It's okay to fall, to forgive, and to fight for what matters. Because love, real love doesn't come easy. But when it's real, it's always worth it. Enjoy the story. Let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story like this. We've got more powerful, emotional stories coming your way, full of heart, twists, and unforgettable characters. Stay with us.